And I got my undergraduate degree. I got an undergraduate degree in Oklahoma. I'll tell you more about that tomorrow when I go ahead and show all my work. But I went out and studied in New Mexico and then went on to San Francisco and got my master's in San Francisco. Now, I was teaching briefly at UC Davis in San Francisco State, and then went on to, I was tired of being broke and driving back and forth. So I got hired in Savannah. It was either a RISD, landscape design, or Savannah, Georgia. I was getting some slides together. I was told to get 3 historical slides and a couple of images of mine. So I thought I would talk a little bit about actually, it happened at lunch. I was really undecided on where I was going to go with this, but I got Adam Clark Gorman, E.C. Gorman's. I got a slide of his, which is up right now, and that is of a Hopi maiden done in 1901. I wanted to just kind of talk a little bit about more, the stereotypical, images of how we're portrayed. I think we went through a lot over that as I was listening to the talk that was before us. But I wanted to talk a little bit about how it affected me as a photographer and where that always, where my work's at. And I picked Adam Clark Gorman, who was born in 1856 and died in 1916. And I also got another slide of Edwardus Curtis's photograph. And I wanted to put a woman in there, if I can find a woman. I thought about Casimir, Gertrude, and then I was looking at Dorothy Lange. I teach documentary photography at the Savannah College of Art and Design, and also photojournalism. And I was looking at Dorothy Lange's photographs of the Hopi woman, and I also thought about Laura Gilpin, but we talked a lot about her stuff. I often wondered, and when I talk about, why the Native American, the Indian, and tribal people were so sought after in European minds, and it goes all the way back into the paintings. The painters of the 19th century, the historicals, paintings that they did. George Catlin. We have Bodmer doing paintings. I talk a little bit about, I talk about the Hudson River School, Albert Bierstedt paintings, making the West look so majestic. You look at the Western School of paintings of Remington and Russell's and how they portray the beautiful lands, and you got the European people thinking of this vast country that's untamed, and you look at their countries and they've been settled and taken apart and been touched, and here yet we have the United States of America, and people wondering why such a interest was happening here in this country. But the paintings had such an impact on it, and they kind of romanticized the Native American. I was thinking a little bit also today, we talked a little bit about it today at lunch, about the impact of the German culture and how they had, what they had on the Native Americans. Back in the 50s and 60s, early 60s, there was a writer by the name of Carl May who wrote a lot about Native Americans. Every year I load my car up and I travel across America photographing Native Americans. And I always try to make Crow Fair, and you see all these German tourists coming through, and they're very beautiful beaders, and they research our beadwork, and they come on up to the Mandan and Fort Berthold, and they research our buckskins and our buckskin work, and what type of buckskin are they going to use and stuff like that. And they go back to Germany and have their own dances. And Max Beecher even Andrea Robbins have a little photograph. I should have brought slides on that. I'm pretty sure you're all aware of the work, right? Of German Indians. Everybody? But even a fellow by the name of David Leventhal, who photographed the young toys that had the Cowboys and Indians series. A little bit of Danny Lange today doing Indian country. I don't know if you've seen his work. That's quite new right now. And we had the writers like James Fenimore Cooper writing The Last of the Mohicans. And that was really, it was inspired by a daguerreotype of Minnehaha Falls. And again, the big mural in Congress, which was commissioned by Congress in 1836, showing Pocahontas bathed in light while being baptized amid a crowd of Indians and English colonists. And the noble savage was presented as an icon, a lone, dignified figure, frequently labeled the last of his race or the last of her tribe. And these images appeared in public spaces and on parlor walls and lithographs made from paintings. They became very popular. And, at first the Indians were really hesitant to have their photographs taken, and their attitudes became more accepting, mainly because of the delegations that went on to Washington, D.C. to maybe talk about treaty rights, land rights, and the ethnology department in there taking out their cameras and documenting who came. And to the Native American, they said, well, it's good, they're going to have a photograph of me, and people are going to know that I did come to Washington, D.C. to talk about our treaties that the United States made. Also, there was a little resistance. Red Cloud, who, for example, never wanted his photograph taken. Crazy Horse never had a photograph taken of him. Geronimo, on the other hand, he charged for his picture, and he had a sliding scale. He would always, it's going to cost you a little bit more if you're going to do a portrait of me, or if what type of camera you use is going to, for the sitting time, it's going to cost a little bit more. The cameras changed, and the exposure times became less and less. And you didn't have to sit as much. And when you look at these older images of Native Americans, they're sitting so stoic. And on some of these large exposure times, some were 4 or 5 minutes, and they also had neck braces where the Indians would have to sit there and not move. And I was thinking maybe that had a lot to do with the stoicness of it. I was also concerned about women in photography. That's why I put Dorothy Lange's image in there, and the problems of the role of the woman in photography. A lot of these earlier photographers that came on in usually were family oriented, and some of them did die. The women carried on the name of the photographer and usually signed the photographer's name. So, looking at this first slide of A.C. Gorman's slide of a Hopi woman, Victor's in here, and I asked Victor this afternoon if he knew the lady. And it's always good. It excites me when an image like this is done by a turn-of-the-century photographer, and you've got someone coming up and say, "Oh, yeah, that's my great-great-grandmother." I taught briefly at the Institute of American Indian Arts earlier in my career, and we talked a lot about A.C. Gorman, Adam Clark Gorman's work, and then Everett S. Curtis's work. And it was always good to hear little Indian kids, talk about it, and I would question them, how do you feel about this? And it's the only picture we have of my great-great-grandfather. It's good, we have that on the wall, and things like that, which was really quite exciting to show that. So, There was a number of other photographs I could have put in here, like Hiller's, the German photographer. I think we really well butchered Sewell's this afternoon, so I'm going to talk a little bit about him. William Henry Jackson, who was I kind of, have a little bit of respect for him, of how he traveled and photographed and went on. So the next slide I have up there, I'm pretty sure is it Everest Curtis, and that is of Bear's Belly, who's in Arikara. So Curtis going out there and photographing. When you look at Everest Curtis's works and having clothes of different tribal people and putting them on, different Indians, and taking portraits and really making them look stoic. All the earlier books, you see a lot of that happening. Dr. Ferris, I think, showed some work this afternoon of an Everest Curtis woman smiling. It was so good to see that. Regardless of how bad Curtis was, he did record a lot of lost songs and music and language, and even did some video stills and things like that. So I put that in there also. The next slide is of Dorothy Lange, and you kind of get an image of how she knew her subject matter and how relaxed the subject matter was. And here we have a little bit of a smile. And Dorothy Lange, a very beautiful, not actually a turn-of-the-century photographer, but more of an FSA photographer, documentary photographer. But, taking photographs just differently. And I could talk to my students about, well, what would it be like if there were women photographers at the turn of the century, and how would the subject matter be changed? Would we look as stoic and how do you say, holistic, or one with nature? Then we go on and we talk a little bit about how much impact that has in today's world of photography. This is a photograph of mine I did in early 90s. I want to say about 93. This is a fellow by the name of. This is a fellow by the name of Austin Two Moons, who's a Northern Cheyenne. He's from Ashland, Montana, and in my travelings, I would go up and visit him. And I would also kind of have that in my mind, how are you going to portray Austin, say, and as honest as I could. I would sit with him and would talk, and he'd always have these great, beautiful stories, and we would talk and laugh. And his great-great-grandfather fought in the Battle of Little Bighorn, and you see all those paintings and drawings of him in the background. And we would talk about that, and Busby, Montana, that's actually where this was taken. He would tell me about the last Sundance they had, which was not very far from where his house was, and these beautiful stories. I was in San Francisco, and I was in a group show, and of course, this kind of goes with what Monty Russell was talking about. The rent was due, and bills had to be paid, and I was towards the end of the month, and I was asked to be in this group show. So I looked at this image, and I said to myself, well, you could tone this thing, you can sepia tone it, frame it, put it in a show, and this is going to sell. And your rent will be paid, you probably even have a little bit more over to get something to eat. And so I looked at the context sheet, and then I saw this image. And I saw this image, and I was in a dark room, and I had all the chemicals out, and when I saw this image, I looked at it, and I put my hand down, and I said, my God, Zig, if you're going to do something like that, you're going against your way of thinking. I mean, you're going against the way you're teaching. Come on. And it bothered me. It bothered me so much that I left the dark room, put my chemicals up, left the dark room, and pondered. I went back and I laid down. And I said, well, I can't, break that mold. You're going to have to show that. And he has such a beautiful smile, and he was fun. He was fun to joke with and laugh and have a good time. So the next day I went back to the darkroom and I printed this one and put it into the show. Of course, nothing sold, but still, that point was made, and I felt good about it. I told him he's no longer with us now, but I felt good about it. So that's it. That's about all. Thank you.